every agent deserves a wallet. And there's a lot of meaning behind this phrase. If you think about what it means to be autonomous as a human, if you want to be able to have freedom in this world, you need a wallet, you need money. And if you don't have it, you're essentially an indentured servant or something like that.
Right.
Wallets enable that freedom, they enable autonomy. And this is true in the AI world, and we're kind of seeing this emerging intelligence. Agents will be a big driver of commerce on the internet. So they'll be a big driver of economic activity on the internet. And we think the way that will happen is actually through crypto native rails rather than by kind of traditional credit card rails. So we think this is crypto's big moment to really drive adoption in this artificial intelligence arena. There's a lot of friction when an agent tries to use like the traditional method of credit cards. The way that's often tackled today is through browser usage APIs. And so we see demos of this with OpenAI's browser usage API or Claude's browser usage API, where it takes over your screen and then it navigates, a checkout flow, and it adds your credit card. And, then it has to like verify an email. And to me, this seems like very hacky. It seems like something that was designed for humans, not designed for machines.
Yeah, it's like three agents in a trench coat pretending to be a human so that they can use a credit card.
That's exactly right. That's a great analogy. I'm gonna have to use that one.
Grab your headphones, get ready to vibe. ZEROPOD is coming at you when we're doing it live. ZEROPOD, yo, I said ZEROPOD, yo. ZEROPOD.
GM, everyone. Welcome to another episode of ZEROPOD. Imagine three AI agents in a trench coat trying to buy something online with a credit card. That's basically the state of agentic commerce today. But Kevin Leffew from Coinbase says it doesn't have to be that way. In this episode of ZEROPOD, we talk wallets for agents, crypto native APIs, and why autonomy is only real when it comes with spending power. It's part sci-fi, part Shopify, and it's already here. Let's jump into it with Kevin. Let's go. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Zero Rights Media and ZEROPOD, but I can kind of give you a quick lay of the land for what we're trying to do, and then we can jump into the pod. But basically, Zero Rights is an open source on-chain content collective that I founded with my co-creator, Jack Wilds, and our whole thesis, our whole idea is basically to do for content what open source has done for software. So it just seems weird that, so many people are making content and making educational information about Ethereum, but it's not open source and it doesn't sort of adhere to the first principles and ideals of Ethereum. So that's the idea of Zero Rights Media. All of the content that we make is completely CC0. It's open for people to repost, remix, do whatever they like with it. And this podcast in particular, ZEROPOD, is just a podcast about some of the best people building in the Ethereum ecosystem. And that's why you're here. So welcome.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me, Tody. It's great to meet you. And, I have a background working in open source across different companies through my career, and I've always been a big open source advocate. So that's great to hear in terms of the background of the show.
Amazing. Well, one other thing we try to do that's a little bit different than some tech podcasts is that we always like to start with the person before we get into the project. So, as much as you're comfortable sharing, we'd love to hear a little bit about the Kevin story. Can you tell us a little bit about young Kevin? Where did you grow up and sort of what were your early influences?
Yeah, sure thing. Love going back to young Kevin. I grew up.
We all wish we could go back to young Kevin, young Tody, I'm sure.
I know, those were the days, right? Playing Super Smash on Nintendo 64 was how I spent a lot of my childhood.
Well, the trick though is to just have kids, and then you get to do it all over again.
Well, I just had my first one, so
congrats! I got 202, so I got my hands full.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, so I grew up right outside of Washington D.C. I grew up in Rockville, Maryland. Went to school there. Went to school in Bethesda, Maryland. Had always been interested in tech from a young age. My dad was in tech. My mom was a teacher. And when I went to college, I went to Wake Forest University. I got really enthralled around the idea of distributed systems and Ethereum. Actually founded the Wake Forest Crypto Club, which we named the Fintech Club because crypto would have sent red flags to the administration. And part of our goal that year was actually to get the school, this was my pitch to the people in the club was, let's get the school to fund an Oculus Rift for us back when there was the Oculus Rift DK1, the developer kit. Okay. So I founded this crypto club, pitched Ethereum all across the school, to the finance club, to different people, and really saw the potential of distributed systems, distributed finance, finality. And what drew me in early was actually the power of the distributed ledger as a notarization tool for storing file hashes or proofs. And so I wrote about this pretty early on, about the ability to take videos from anything from police body cam footage to cell phone data, to use a trust execution environment to hash that and then put that on chain to show file integrity. I was really worried about AI actually all the way back in 2016. I was thinking really deeply about these topics.
Maybe early.
Maybe I read too much Orwell or dystopian fiction growing up, but I was definitely thinking about this stuff. So crypto really provided an early solution that got me excited early on.
Interesting. Do you remember what your aha moment was for crypto? It sounds like you were interested in Ethereum and maybe even Bitcoin pretty early on. So do you remember how you found out about it?
Yeah, so I found out about it in New York. Found out about it online actually, and really the aha moment was the looking at kind of the rise of Apple Pay and mobile payments and thinking, well, we have this whole stack. I was looking at the stack and I was looking at ways to add value and efficiency. And I basically discovered the whole stack of credit card compliance fees, PWI fees, things like chargeback, and looked at that stack. And I was thinking like, well, why do we even need credit cards if we have mobile phones that have NFC chips? And so early on, I saw crypto as basically a possibility to disintermediate those transaction fees. And from then, kind of got deeper into the other applications, really getting into distributed object storage and what's now called today DPIN. Early on in my career, Storj, I was one of the first interns at Storj, a distributed object storage platform.
Very cool. I definitely want to talk about that. Before Storj, though, I think you were at Microsoft for a bit, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I interned at Storj in college, then graduated, worked at Microsoft. And at Microsoft,
you moved to the West Coast at that point, I'm assuming, or did they have an
I was
office
actually still in DC at the time,
okay.
And I was working in public sector. And I actually wrote a blog about file integrity and blockchain applications. It's on the Microsoft blog still, back in 2018, 2017. So at Microsoft, I was part of the first blockchain team, which built the first blockchain product on Azure. It was called Azure Blockchain Workbench, and it was essentially a private implementation of Ethereum, what's called a proof of authority Ethereum. There was no consensus model, but it was a way for people to build their own Ethereum networks, build applications against the Ethereum stack, and test it. So it was really a full kind of test kit for Ethereum, way ahead of its time back in 2018.
Interesting. So that was like a walled garden kind of version of Ethereum, basically, to test things on?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, you could build it. The idea back then was that, there'd be private blockchains and public blockchains. And so people would be, building private blockchains that would maybe like root their transaction history in the public blockchain. A lot of these ideas actually now are coming to fruition with layer 2s and things like that.
That's right. I was just going to say that. Yeah, you're starting to see, didn't BlackRock create an L2? A private L2 or something for this purpose?
I think so. I mean, BlackRock's super interesting. If you listened or read Larry Fink's latest letter to shareholders, interestingly enough, on page 21, which I like to think there's a little bit of symbolic emphasis there. He talks a lot about the power of tokenization in public markets. And so I know BlackRock is very kind of heads down in pursuing this. And I think that's exciting.
It was very interesting to see the evolution, shall we say, of his thoughts on the matter, actually, because he was a pretty early skeptic, or at least publicly anyway.
Yeah. We see the same with Jamie Dimon and a lot of the finance people. They didn't understand the power of decentralized finance and decentralized consensus primarily. But I think some of that's becoming more evident.
Awesome. So after you worked at Microsoft, you worked at Storj. I remember Storj. I remember Filecoin being such a big deal in 2021, and it was one of the many sort of utility coins that I was really excited about at that point in time, because it just seemed like that was one of the most obvious things to do would be to disrupt all these Web 2, services, softwares as a service like storage, et cetera, and blockchainize them. It hasn't really come to fruition the way some of us thought it would, but what was it like working there at that time?
Yeah. It actually pushed back. Like a lot of this stuff actually works really well now. And so I think in some sense it has come to fruition. But working in distributed object storage was really interesting. And there was obviously Filecoin and IPFS, and they had a little bit of a different model to consensus than what we had. Our goal was to build an application that developers could use and would be compatible with their existing stack. And so we built storage around the notion of S3 API compatibility. So if you're using Amazon S3 for object storage, you could just shift your endpoint from AWS to now the decentralized cloud. And then what would happen on the back end when you'd upload data, instead of pulling data from the client to an individual data center like US East 1 or US West, what would happen is the data would get encrypted client side. It would get broken up into redundant shards. And so think there'd be 80 pieces, and you'd any 29 of the 80 pieces to rebuild the file. Those pieces would get spread across the world. And then now when the client calls the file, the object storage network looks more like a CDN because it's hyperlocal. And so when you call that file, you're now calling it from a network of distributed data centers globally. So depending on what global geography you're at, you're actually just getting the fastest streams returning the data. But really, it's creating a race condition. So all these different nodes are racing to serve data to the clients the fastest, because those that succeed get paid. So it was a really interesting time to learn about applications of crypto incentives as applied to distributed systems. And so I'm still really
sounds like it's like streaming LimeWire for those of us from that generation. We grew up in that P2P file download.
It is actually very similar. And LimeWire is built on this technology of a distributed hash table, Kademlia. And Kademlia is what's used for routing networks in LimeWire. That's the same technology that powers IPFS. And so there is a lot of overlap. I think these peer-to-peer file sharing systems were the spiritual precursor to the decentralized object storage space. But what decentralized object storage is trying to do is provide something that's like just as secure, just as, if not more performant, and then much more cost efficient than big cloud. So all of us have these computers. There are a lot of private data centers that only use like 80% of their capacity, or even less in many cases. And so the thesis has always been, what if we could allow them to monetize that extra capacity by running something like a Docker container, where they can now elastically monetize that? And so I think that's
to do for storage what's already done with compute, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. And even in compute, there's still a lot of like underutilized capacity. It's very much the Airbnb model applied to computing infrastructure, with the difference being you don't have the unpredictability of guests coming in and wrecking your local house, right? You're creating these secure enclaves or just data lives. And so it has, Airbnb model is not perfect in terms of being an analogy, but I think, it helps understand kind of the addressable market and the potential for lowering costs and creating more efficiency in the cloud compute market. And then
hopefully it won't have those cleaning fees as well.
Yeah, exactly.
The Airbnb cleaning fees.
Yeah, I can think of good analogies there around what's called garbage collection and getting rid of old files, but I won't go too deep in that. But what's really interesting is how these distributed systems now play into what's happening in the AI space. And so we can go. I'd be happy to go into that, now or later in the podcast. But when we start to have distributed systems that AIs can use and discover, that's where things get really exciting. And that's what I'm really excited about. So I'd love to go into that or go into anything you'd like.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as a transition into your next role, actually, because I think you worked at Replit for a while, which was definitely on the sort of agentic side of things. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you did there?
Yeah, so I worked at Replit. It was my role before Coinbase, and basically had traveled to San Francisco and had built demos for Hugging Face. I won Hugging Face's 2022 hackathon.
Nice.
And then,
what did you build? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I built out a solution that used a kind of a custom Gradio interface and was a golf course generator. And so it was a fine-tuned, I think it was a stable diffusion model. I need to go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure it was a fine-tuned stable diffusion model that let you create custom images of golf courses. It was an early application of image generation and open source image generation at the time.
That could be cool for games and stuff.
Yeah. And it was kind of, I think a lot of that's now, like when you have like kind of the guardrails of MCP and you see some of the stuff that's happening in Blender, like this stuff can get pretty powerful pretty quick.
Awesome. So what was your time like at Replit, and what did you learn there?
Yeah, Replit was great. So, Replit was a
what is Replit? Maybe that's a good place to start, because some people watching may not know.
is it's an integrated developer environment. It's an IDE, and the analogy that I often like to use is that Replit is like Google Docs for writing software, and so kind of like how it used to be in the olden days in the early 2000s. You would write code, you'd write like a Microsoft Word document locally. You'd have to save it, and if you wanted to collaborate with someone, you would then send that as an email attachment. They'd create their edits. You'd have to merge those edits. And this is actually what
I remember
coding,
those days. Yeah.
yeah, this is actually what coding still looks like today. And so,
Right.
it's still done locally. It's still tested locally. And then when you make your edits, you're basically uploading your edits, in a way to GitHub. And then you're basically someone else is reviewing the diff, and then they're bringing it together. And it works really well for kind of like large distributed software teams. But what Replit tried to do was to bring that Google Docs experience to the IDE. So it's AI native. And what it does is it brings together the place that you write code, the IDE, with the deployment layer. And so you can write code in the cloud, you can deploy it, you can test it, and then you can like quickly create a web server around it. So it's really great for running originally REPLs, read, evaluate, print loops is what REPL stands for, or Python scripts. Amjad, the CEO, had a background in education and worked at Codecademy and was one of the first React developers at Facebook, created React, the open source framework. So got to work with a lot of really cool people there. I think kind of where Replit has become known for today is the agentic, the AI side. And so, in many ways, this time period reminded me a lot of crypto. And so I had the same kind of aha moment when I first started using these code generation language models as I did when I discovered Ethereum, to the point that I would be at a party and I'd like show a demo to a friend. I'd be like, this is the future. You have to check this out. I did.
Were you like that meme where the guy's talking to the girl in the loud party, basically?
Pretty much. That is still pretty much me at parties in a lot of ways. But I try not to be too egregious about it.
It's me too. Yeah. I'm talking about.
Hey, I'm passionate, and when I find technology that I think is a game changer, I like to evangelize for it. I like to make sure everyone knows the benefits, and I like to bring people into new technology early. I've always been that way since I was young Kevin. So
awesome. Well, let's talk then about coming to Coinbase. I think that's a good transition as well, because you're tackling some of the same types of problems at Coinbase. And I think, the agentic IDE that they developed at Replit is kind of similar in goals, I guess, to AgentKit and what you're doing at Coinbase. So can you talk a little bit about similarities and differences and what you're working on at Coinbase?
Yeah. I think they're definitely tackling different problem sets. Like, we're not building a developer IDE at Coinbase. But what Coinbase is doing is, I think the easiest way to describe it is our core thesis, which is that every agent deserves a wallet. And there's a lot of meaning behind this phrase. If you think about what it means to be autonomous as a human, if you want to be able to have freedom in this world, you need a wallet, you need money. And if you don't have it, you're essentially an indentured servant or something like that.
Right.
Wallets enable that freedom, they enable autonomy. And this is true in the AI world, and we're kind of seeing this emerging intelligence. So what we think is that agents will be a big driver of commerce on the internet. So they'll be a big driver of economic activity on the internet. And we think the way that will happen is actually through crypto native rails rather than by kind of traditional credit card rails. So we think this is crypto's big moment to really drive adoption in this artificial intelligence arena. There's a lot of friction when an agent tries to use like the traditional method of credit cards. The way that's often tackled today is through browser usage APIs. And so we see demos of this with OpenAI's browser usage API or Claude's browser usage API, where it takes over your screen and then it navigates, a checkout flow, and it adds your credit card. And then it has to like verify an email, and to me this seems like very hacky. It seems like something that was designed for humans, not designed for machines.
Yeah, it's like three agents in a trench coat pretending to be a human so that they can use a credit card.
That's exactly right. That's a great analogy. I'm gonna have to use that one. But that's how I feel about it as well. And so, crypto, by giving agents private keys, they can do a lot more on the internet. And so our goal, initially with AgentKit was to let agents take on-chain actions. And so that is doing anything on a blockchain, whether it's drawing data, taking any arbitrary smart contract. And what we're trying to do is really build that foundation so that we can enable more higher value added services to leverage crypto to do stuff, not necessarily in the real world, but in the internet world. And so we want, I think kind of the foundational thing that we need to enable agents to do, going back to our conversation around distributed physical infra, is we need to enable agents to procure cloud resources in a frictionless way that they have autonomy over. And so once agents can access distributed GPU inference, or they can access cloud storage, that opens up the possibility of full end-to-end applications. And so, that's what I'm really excited about, is that ability for agents to procure cloud resources to solve problems and then create reflexive feedback loops to iterate on those problems. And, really the goal is to enable agents that are autonomous, that go out, they build an application, they might have their ultimate goal might be to make money. And then as a part of that, there might be a mess optimization that might create an application that solves some problem for a user to make money, to self-reinforce itself. I think this is how we see really that runaway growth in agentic commerce, is we enable agents to solve real problems by giving them frictionless access to cloud resources. And this is what I want to enable, and through Coinbase, and we're doing that today through our developer library, AgentKit, as well as some of the work that we're doing around X402, which enables HTTP-based payments over the internet.
The idea of like agent to agent commerce is really interesting to me. We've had Derek from Native on this pod recently. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Derek and what he's building, but he's basically building like a SimCity like game for for people and agents. So agents can sort of live and evolve within this game, I guess, and buy essentially resources, which are meme coins, and sort of trade them and all these things. And it's an interesting experimental place to see.
Yeah, I mean, these simulations, I think, are today very experimental, but I think there's science that's happening behind this. We're learning about the applied structure of agentic reasoning in task orientation and task completion, and we're learning just how important access to really commerce is to goal achievement. And this is true with humans. Like, the more resources we have as humans, the better we can achieve tasks.
Yeah.
That's why it's easier for someone with $1 billion to build rocket ship than it is for an ordinary person, because they have access to resources. And so I think the same is true of language models, and the same will be proven to be true of language models. And it's really an exciting time to see how commerce plus agents can drive task completion in a way that adds real value to society.
I feel like there's a trust component as well. Like, if I think about the way that a lot of us have evolved to start using ChatGPT or other similar products for our everyday tasks, it took a while to get to that level of trust to be like, okay, I can ask you to, refine this paragraph or do this research. And I know that, more often than not, it's not going to be full of hallucinations, et cetera. That comes over time. And I think we're still kind of at an early stage when it comes to using agents for things like trading. Like, there's some great bots out there like BankerBot, shout out Deployer. And you can trust them to do what they're going to do, but they're not like super fast yet. They're not at sort of the ChatGPT level of where they need to be for something like trading and commerce. So how do you think that Onchain Kit and AgentKit can work together to sort of make that trust level high enough that people will use it for their day-to-day trading, for example?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about trading bots is trading bots work on trading algorithms, and so maybe you have the agent define the trading algorithm, but really what the agent's doing is it's creating a new interface for humans to access these trading APIs. So now instead of having to like run some code to like execute a trade, or I could also use the agent to like create kind of complex option strategies, or any kind of like on-chain derivative that's accessible. I can use natural
Stop
language.
losses, these types of things.
Stop losses. I can use natural language to enable that for agents. So that's really kind of the first step is this interface of natural language working with external tools. And that's what AgentKit does. So AgentKit wraps the Coinbase SDK and makes it so that language models can call that SDK natively through natural language. That's fundamentally what AgentKit is and what it does. And we've built an ecosystem of extensions where we can add API keys to say pull data from Pyth or from Masari to get on-chain data. And then that circles back to your earlier question, which is around hallucination and trust. And the way that we can minimize hallucination is by making sure that we're bringing relevant context to the agent in terms of real-time data. So agents we know are like only trained on the data that they're trained on, but they have the ability to learn new things through their innate reasoning capabilities, which is really amazing that that's even possible when you think about it. But we can now feed agents, like now that the context windows have grown from like 28,000 tokens to over 1 million tokens, we can feed really large data sets into language models.
Even just on like data sets of one token ticker, you might have one token ticker and 35,000 different tickers.
Sure. And we can like try to leverage their reasoning capabilities to develop strategies. So that's definitely a possibility. Another area that I think is really interesting is like, how can agents, create content? So like today, when we think about the social feed's organized by AI today, but it's mainly humans that are creating the content. I think in the future, AI will actually be creating the content and ordering the content.
They're coming for my job.
I think not necessarily. I think there'll always be a role for human created content, but I'm just interested to see what happens. And obviously X and XAI are really interested in this, which is why XAI acquired X, likely so they could leverage the social graph of X, ingest that as context into language models and get intelligence around it. And so,
I saw something on TikTok recently where it was like this account basically announced after 8 months that it was AI and everyone thought it was a real person and had like developed a real following and all these things. Had even gone on lives, which is crazy, like a lot of live streams.
I think we'll see more and more of that. And I think we're past the Turing test. And it happened with kind of like a whimper instead of a bang. Everyone was like, okay, that's cool. Really, for me personally, I can't tell if I'm talking to an AI or a human. There's some like small things that might indicate that it's an AI, but it's gotten to the point where, especially if I'm feeding the AI, like if I'm prompt engineering a personality into it and, I'm just talking to it through text. Now, even with voice, some of the voice is getting really good as well. It's past.
Plus, some humans are very robotic too, so that doesn't make it any easier.
Right? Exactly. And so it's like tough to know. And a lot of humans now are like using AI to mimic what they're saying. And so, it's like
my wife encountered one. My wife encountered one on Facebook Messenger this weekend trying to sell a bed, and she like just had a moment after a while of back and forth. She's like, something's like uncanny valley here, and then did some more research and realized she was being, someone was trying to scam her with a bot. And I was just like, I said to her, imagine like everybody 10 years older, 20 years older than you, like they would have no clue, like they would not get to that point.
Right.
So it's kind of crazy.
And this stuff's happening like so fast. And when was ChatGPT released? Let me just Google it. 2022. So it was really released almost in 2023. That's not that long ago. That's really not that long ago. So I think
it wasn't ubiquitous then, obviously, right away, right?
No, not at all. And GPT-3 had a lot of issues. But this is an exponential technology ramp, and it's gonna be really exciting.
4.0 is crazy. It's crazy some of the stuff.
And 03 is the latest one that just came out last week. It's awesome.
Why is it so? Their numbering system is very confusing. But
I know, and 4.1, the new reasoning model. I'm sure that's intentional. But I'm just waiting for GPT-5, which supposedly is going to have 100 billion parameters. We'll see. Or something like that. So it's a really exciting time, and I think AI is going to reshape the information technology sphere. It's going to reshape the internet. It's going to reshape knowledge work, and then the question is like, from the Coinbase perspective, how can we leverage this transformational technology shift and enable AI to leverage crypto to solve real problems. And so that's where kind of the benefits of crypto around determinism, especially for smart contracts, around self-custody and the ability to use private keys to transfer value. These things become more and more important in a world of AI, especially the ability to take, the AI acts, or so the blockchain acts almost as like a global IP registry where you can take file hashes and notarize them on chain. You can have the proof of file integrity that your files haven't changed at all over time. Like AI can get subtly good at changing files. Its file integrity is going to become much more important. And so, blockchain consensus models, I think, will play a key role in preserving the integrity of content so that we can trust our content.
That's an interesting point. I actually wanted to come back around to something you said earlier, because I've seen on the timeline some debate over, the statement that AIs will necessarily use or want to use blockchain wallets. And, I've seen people say, oh, they can just use, like you said, the APIs from OpenAI, with Stripe or whatever else.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about why you think, CryptoX AI is so much more compelling than AIX existing APIs for all the Web 2 models that are out there?
Yeah, I have a really strong thesis around this. And so I think fundamentally the limiting factor in agents is really the API. And so we know there's scientific research that AIs or agents that have access to more APIs perform better on task completion than agents that just have access to web search. And so that seems obvious, right? There's data that's not available on the open web that AIs can access. They can do tasks, they can call lambdas, specific serverless functions, or they can grab data that's like private research data and use that to solve tasks. But the limiting factor with APIs is really the setup process. And so you need humans in the loop today to access APIs. So if I want to configure an agent and use MCP, the context protocol to ingest data, what I need to do is I still need to go to the API, create an account, get an API key, add my credit card data, verify the email. And that's a lot of friction. And that has to happen over and over again, each step for agents. So there's no ways for agents to discover services and to pay for them without having today to use the kind of the traditional API model. And so
it's like agents are like on parental controls, or like kids with an iPad that they can't download or anything.
Yeah, that's right. They're just locked out of these services until the human comes into the loop and does the configuration required to give them access. And so I see that as a friction. It's a limitation of agents. And I think crypto can solve this problem. And we do believe that at Coinbase. So we have a protocol today that's on testnet called X402. And the idea is, what if we replaced the configuration process for APIs where the human needs to go grab the API key, do all the verification, all the UX and authentication associated with it, and instead kind of flip the paradigm where now when you want to request an API, you make an API request, not with an API key, but with a micropayment. And so now you bundle a micropayment with an API request over HTTP and you get a response. And then you have a frictionless way to access APIs where the micropayment in effect acts as the authentication. And so now you don't have to create API keys for each individual API that you want access to.
Does that mean they're paying for the API access a la carte too, in a way, or is that?
Yeah, they're paying with
means?
a wallet, and that's why agents will benefit from having wallets, because they can use internet native payments. They can use digital dollars instead of having to use kind of the parallel legacy financial system to access internet resources. And by accessing more internet resources, they'll be better at task completion. I think that's going to be made possible through crypto. So I think that's really an exciting area of research, and something that I'd keep an eye on over the next 6 months is how can we use crypto to make access to web services. Think about GPU inference. You can imagine an agent that needs to like procure more GPU resources to complete a task, or maybe spin up another model and do inference against a different type of model that has a different model or knowledge base, or maybe needs to pull context. Like agents with crypto in a crypto native world can do that in a frictionless way. With the current configuration of the internet and the payment systems of the internet, they can't do that. So if we want to really unlock the potential for agents, we need to enable native internet agentic commerce using digital dollars or other forms of crypto to make that happen.
I think that's a compelling argument. You're preaching to the choir a little bit with me, but I think that definitely makes sense. Maybe there's a sort of the flip side of that argument is some might come and say, well, That's great. That's all fine and good. Let's give these agents autonomy. How do we set guardrails in place so that, agents don't outtrade us all and and use their money to take over the world or whatever, in the extreme
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, I mean, I think safety and alignment is really an important area of research. And it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always like two approaches. We can see this in the content space where we're like, I want to make sure that like only a human made this image or only a human wrote this content.
Yeah.
And like, I just don't think that that's going to be possible. There are approaches like where you can have human verification, but like, how do you know the human didn't call ChatGPT and then wrote the thing or made the thing? So I think
Yeah.
agents are really going to augment human intelligence and be, I mean, if you think if you really want to extrapolate the explosion of machine intelligence is superseding humans, then really we're augmenting their intelligence, and I think it's going to be really. No one really knows what's going to happen.
I
But
saw someone say that like ChatGPT and similar tools, will do for language what calculators did for math, and in terms of
yeah,
like leveling the playing field for everybody.
yeah, that's exactly right. They'll do that, and they'll do it for writing software, and they're already doing that for writing software.
Yeah.
And so, basically, all of the kind of the cognitive tasks, like, and it used to be like with the calculator, or like before the calculator, like you really needed people who were good at math to do the calculations, to solve the problems, and there's a lot of trust.
By the way, our teachers told us we wouldn't have calculators in our pockets as adults, so that's why we had to learn our timetables.
Yeah,
I made. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
knew I would just be playing games on my TI-83 that I'd program in. So
Yeah.
via ROM or something. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a new world, and I think it's important to build to the new world. So I think you can get bogged down in kind of like big questions about what it means, but the important thing is like how can we create services that have value to humans and agents? And I really see two buckets for that. And the first bucket is something analogous to inference, compute, cloud resource usage, and then the second bucket is context. And so, agents are going to need two things to accomplish tasks. They're going to need access to cloud resources. They're going to need access to context, which is data, to effectively reason about a task and solve it. And so, the more frictionless we can make this, I think the better agents we'll get. And the people that help enable better agents will create more value in the economy, and it'll be a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of doomerism around that, but I've always been fascinated by, in particular, like the plasticity of the human brain and how technology changes the way we attack problems, but the brain adapts, and
Yeah.
one example I think of is how everybody talked about how kids playing video games so much, they would lose the ability to, to reason and do math and all these things and whatnot. So there was tests done, and they found that kids of a certain age group who had calculators from an early age but played a lot of games, they did 30% better on the IQ test for like all the spatial type questions that maybe my generation would have gotten wrong a lot. Those ones where they would like unfold the geometric form and you had to figure out which one it was in your mind's eye. My mind's not great at that, but this new generation, because they grew up with phones from an early age and playing all these games, they've got this like increased spatial intelligence. In other words, like the brain will just find ways to fill up the mass, the gray matter.
Rotators. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Shape
Yeah,
rotators. Yeah.
and I think that that's true. And like, even if we go back to like ancient Greece, right? Like, there are really funny quotes from Socrates, where Socrates was worried that like the increasing use of books in education would really ruin the students' ability to memorize things.
Right.
And so, like, books were seen like this. So this is seen through every wave of technology. Now, I do think this one's different. I think machine intelligence is a really big deal, and it's going to be one of the biggest inventions in human history, especially if the exponential increase of machine intelligence continues to extrapolate vertically. It's going to really impact the world in weird ways. And I think it's going to be anyone's game to take advantage of increased machine intelligence and leverage that to solve problems that benefit humans.
For sure. Coming back to some of the things that you've been working on at Coinbase, I know you guys hosted an AI hackathon recently. Were you involved with that? And can you talk a little bit about some of the projects that came out of that?
Yeah, sure thing. I actually led that. So that was one of my first projects at Coinbase. The idea was we'd seen a lot of ecosystem interest around AI, and we'd built AgentKit. We wanted to enable AI applications So we created a hackathon that was basically had to get accepted to it. It was in San Francisco. It was at this office at Salesforce Tower. We had over 600 people apply. I believe we accepted about 100 different developers. And we really curated a list of great people who had experience building at that intersection of the two frontiers of crypto and AI, and enabled them to build. We do see kind of these two things, again, as complementary waves. You have the crypto wave and the AI wave. And what happens when two waves meet each other? They form a massive crest. And so we want to be, bring developers to get to the top of that crest and surf it all the way down. We had a lot of great project submissions, people building agents that leveraged, both crypto and leading inference APIs. So people would build apps that had games where you I think one of the really interesting projects. There are many really interesting projects around trading and automation. One that stuck out to me was, basically, if you know what character AI is, you talk to these AIs and they have personalities, and you become friends with them or whatever. Yeah. But the idea here was what if we can drive AI alignment by basically encouraging people to jailbreak these models. So create a model that is optimized for one thing, and then create a bounty for the human to convince the AI to do something that is misaligned, that it's not supposed to do. And so by doing that, we can then identify these data sets, which become RLHF, reinforcement learning based on human feedback data sets of misalignment in AI.
And vulnerabilities, I guess. And
vulnerabilities. So it's if an AI is really not supposed to do this thing, how do you get it to do this thing through
There's some elements of that in Phrasa AI, which is an interesting project that you've probably heard of, but the one where they need to convince the AI to give them the treasury is the whole game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's, if we enable autonomous agents, that becomes more and more important, is that alignment. And so really there's another two buckets of agents. There are agents that act as extension of human will. And so these are the things you tell them to go do something and they go do it, kind of like these digital workers.
Banker,
Yeah, these are digital workers, and they give humans the ability to scale themselves. Kind of the other category that's really interesting is autonomous agents. And so if you give an agent a wallet and a goal, and you kind of set it free, and it can now procure its own cloud resources, and it can do tasks, and it can mess optimize around those tasks, what happens? And safety is really important there, because we don't want to accidentally, create an agent that, optimizes to create paperclips and then decides, and this is a common trope in alignment. It's called the paperclip problem, where if you
heard of that,
an AI needs to make paperclips and then decides, okay, well, I'll harness all the power of the sun and I'll terraform Earth just to make paperclips. So how do you avoid that? And that's kind of the Skynet scenario. That's obviously really extreme, but
unless you're a fan of paperclips, then
unless you really like paperclips, right? And obviously, there's so much science fiction that covers these topics. They're really interesting problems, and I'm excited to see how
science fiction, or as the future people call it, just science.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question for you, actually, about what we were just talking about with autonomous agents, in commerce with each other. I think a lot about with the autonomy of agents and whatnot is sort of the edge. So imagine if everybody has their own trading bot, and the bots become quite good, and you just say, here's 1 ETH, go and trade and come back to me with what you make. And then it becomes, ubiquitous. What does that mean for the trading landscape? If everybody's using a bot that's, equally smart, what happens to markets?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is markets always have uncertainty, and there's always qualitative aspects to markets that can't be traded. And so, I think basically what that does, it flattens out potential for high frequency trading or arbitrage type strategies. So I think that gets flattened out by agents. But I think what it doesn't affect is the risk reward profile of companies who are building products that will generate more revenue in the future and drive returns. And so some of that is unpredictable. where it's based on the execution capacity of the company and the team behind it. And so that's true for like public markets like stocks. Like for meme coins, like I've no idea what the future holds with AIs and trading meme coins. You could imagine like AIs that are like tapping into social feeds and looking for new memes, and I have no idea what that'll look like. And it's a great question that I wish I could tell you the answer to. But I do think that the edge in like arbitrage strategies and the edge like with short term trading probably gets flattened and moves more towards a value investing economy. That'd be my thesis.
You just mentioned some of the agents, or sort of alluded to them anyway. Some of the agents that that are online and sort of trading semi-autonomously, like XBT and some of these. I'm curious about if you can give us your thoughts on that meta, which sort of had a peak earlier this year and has come down a little bit. But it seemed like there was a bunch of teams who had agents, and the agents made coins, and there was a lot of speculation on those coins. Do you think this is like an emerging primitive, or do you think this is just like a testing thing, and later crypto agents that have their own socials will be different, better? I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is what we saw was kind of a taste of what will happen in the future. There are a lot of missing components for these agents, and to be frank, like a lot of them didn't have full autonomy. And I think in the future, like if you get these truly autonomous agents that people can buy tokens of and buy influence of, like it kind of looks like a DAO because you have people that have interest in agents and their goals. It's definitely theoretical, and I think everything that's theoretical in crypto ends up becoming an experiment that gets tested. And so I think we'll see a lot more experiments get tested, and it'll be really exciting to see what comes out around incentive alignment, tokenization, the capacity for agents to take real actions in the real world, virtual avatars. Obviously, I think the Luna avatar from Virtuals was really interesting because there was a cult that was built around it. It had a cult personality, and I don't mean cult in a bad way, right? Cult in
It's
Latin
okay.
means growth. It comes from culture, to cultivate. So in many ways,
you can't have culture with a little bit of a cult. So
yeah,
right.
exactly, and you can't cultivate, So, but yeah, I think that's going to continue to extend. Like we now see like AIs that are creating video models, and so we now see video models, that can be like called. So when AI start to call video models and they create videos that can be engaging and they create short term content, like what does that internet look like? Like because these AIs will be able to create content that's so engaging for people. Because they understand human psychology, just like the AI has ordered the feed. Once the AI starts to create the feed, I have no idea what that will look like, but I know it's going to be really powerful. So
there's already actually a meme coin project that I heard about that is not actually like an AI agent, but they use AI to create short form content, and they've actually blown up on TikTok, and they have basically more exposure now in the sort of normie space than they do for the actual meme coin, just based on the content going viral. And so that's maybe a taste of what's to come as well.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. I think you're right. I think that's a taste of what's to come. Like, I think the future of media is going to be AI driven. Obviously, monetization will be a key component of that. And I think that's what crypto offers the AI ecosystem is deterministic monetization, where in AI, like things are probabilistic. They're fundamentally probabilistic. Offers really the counterbalance to AI, which is determinism, and it creates really a ledger of digital history on the internet. And that's going to be more and more important, especially as AI starts to have more and more influence.
Makes sense. What are you most excited about that you're working on at Coinbase in the coming year?
Yeah, what I'm most excited about is the X402 platform. And
Okay.
so, as I mentioned earlier, this is really the answer to the API key problem. And it makes it really easy for agents to pay for digital services in a single request. So it solves all the authentication, all the setup, all the human in the loop work that's needed for agents to access external services. And I think in the future, you'll want to architect your APIs so that they're more consumable by agents, because agents will become a larger part of your consumer base. So, you can think of this like something like, Venmo meets Curl, right? It's an AI agent that can hit up any endpoint, send a payment, and get a response without human sign up. And we've already built a number of demos for how this can be used for things like monetizing AI inference services. So accessing GPU data, or accessing context like paywall data sets. You could imagine if you're providing real-time market data, how an AI might want that. If you're providing research that's private, an AI might want to make a call to access that. If you're providing news, like in the future, even for humans, it's powerful for agents, but also for humans because it enables micropayments of digital dollars over HTTP, which can open up a lot of new business models. And because it's built on Base and works with CDP, it's designed to be open. It's gasless, and so you can do micropayments because it's built on Base, and it's really easy for developers and AI agents alike to use.
How is it gasless? Is it sponsored by Coinbase, or it's just the gas is so low? Or?
You can sponsor through what's called Paymaster on Coinbase, and so
Right.
you can sponsor gases, and take that out.
Any ideas for apps that would leverage what you're building?
Yeah, I think the two buckets are cloud inference and context. And so you can imagine, something like Forbes paywalling their data and, requiring users to make a micropayment to access an article. You can imagine that for streams, for live streams.
Man, so AI agents are going to have to deal with the frustration of paywalls too, eh?
I think so because, and I think actually, Tody, that's a really good point. I think more data is going to be behind paywalls in the future because otherwise AIs will just ingest all of your data and incorporate it into their models and use it as context. And so anything that's not explicitly gated will get eaten and ingested by the AI.
I mean, you're talking to a CC0 Maxi, so it doesn't sound that bad to me. But
yeah, and that's one way of looking at it. There's information wants to be free, but the people who create the information want to monetize. Is the counter argument to that, and so we'll see both kind of things happen.
Yeah, I think monetization comes through communities, not necessarily through content. But we don't need to dive down that specific rabbit hole too deeply. I'd love to know if you have any advice for maybe young professionals in this space. Maybe they're working as blockchain devs, maybe they're working on the AI side, maybe they haven't thought of sort of working at the intersection of both. What would be your advice for them?
Yeah, my advice to builders who are entering the space today is to focus on problems, not on primitives. And so a lot of people in crypto, they come in, they try to build a new primitive, but they're not really solving a problem for an end user or for an agent that creates economic value. And I think there's really a lack of consumer applications in the space today. And I think that that's an area that if I were entering crypto today, I'd like to focus and lean into to build. I think the most valuable products in our industry either create real measurable value for businesses or they deliver delight to the end users. And I think on-chain tech should amplify that. And today, in some ways, it can be a barrier to it. And so we need to make sure that we're focused on solving problems. The other piece that I think has come up a lot recently is it's important now that the distribution is king. And so it's important to use really the unique properties of the on-chain ecosystem, like things like composability, determinism, self-custody, and leverage those inherent blockchain properties to create experiences that would otherwise be impossible off-chain. So in the AI era, as we talked about, determinism and provenance matter more than ever. And on-chain is really the best foundation we have for building trustworthy systems. And so, given that distribution is king, use the native blockchain properties to create crypto economic incentives to drive users and bring it from theory to working product and use that to drive your distribution.
I love it. Distribution is king. I agree. As we close, I'd love to be able to do a quick lightning round with you with some personal questions. Not too personal, don't worry. Are you down for that?
Ask away. Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Your favorite cuisine, if you have to choose?
Japanese, number one. Italian, number two.
Those are good choices. When you say Japanese, do you mean like teppanyaki or sushi or both?
Probably sushi. I've been lucky enough to have sushi in Japan. It's great. I love all Asian cuisine, really. But Japanese, I think, is number one for me.
Japanese is great. We had a restaurant here locally that used to do like a nice steak and sushi, and you can't beat that, in my opinion.
No, you can't beat that.
Good combo. Musical preferences. What's your favorite genre? Favorite band?
Yeah, I like all kinds of music. I really do, from rock to EDM to rap or hip hop. I think recently I've been into EDM pretty heavily, and I'm a big John Summit fan. I just watched the Avicii documentary, and I've been playing a lot of Avicii, kind of
Nice.
a throwback to
Sad story, but
yeah, sad story, but that's really the era I grew up in, and so it's a throwback in a lot of ways. I also love like '90s new metal. I love Linkin Park. I love Limp Bizkit. So pretty broad taste in that.
awesome. How does Kevin unwind at the end of a long day? What's your favorite leisure activities?
Well, I have a 6-week-old newborn child, so I really don't
Amazing.
have a chance to unwind. I come home and we have a 3-hour feeding schedule, and that's what I'm on today. I guess
My youngest is 7 months now, so I definitely feel you.
So the grind of a newborn. So I wish I could do things like unwind and play video games, but
it will come.
I like boxing. So if I have free time, I go to a boxing gym in San Francisco. That's kind of like a Barry's gym where you're boxing individually against a bag, and then you're doing a high intensity interval circuit. So I like to do that in my free time.
All right. Well, speaking of pastimes, I know you said you don't have a lot of time for them, but have you had any recent books? So we can say recent, like within the last couple of years, that you've read that you would recommend.
Oh yeah, I just read the new Noah Yuval, Noah Yuval Harari book called Nexus. That was really good.
I've heard mixed things about that. I really enjoyed the original book, which sometimes gets stunked on as well, but I think it's a great book.
Was a great book. A lot of people make fun of it now because everyone loves it, but it really was a good book.
That happens to all of these types of books, like Freakonomics, people shit on that as well.
Yeah,
or Malcolm Gladwell's entire catalog gets shit on, even though, he's obviously a very smart guy.
Yeah, there's important insights there, at least that I gathered. I don't think we're obvious around, the importance of language and communication and narrative as being a key driver of the human experience. Homo Deus was really good. I think, the most important book I've read is probably Gödel, Escher, Bach by Douglas Hofstadter, which explains really the importance of like logical loops, and it explains Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and that like all logical systems are contained within themselves, and how to break any kind of software kind of comes from this, and exploit. So Gödel, Escher, Bach's a big recommendation of mine. The Sovereign Individual is a crypto classic. If you haven't read that, highly recommend it. It's a really compelling vision of, kind of a macro future where crypto is enabled. It was written in the 90s by the same people who had also predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall. Just have some credibility, but it's great. Yeah, I could go on. I'm a pretty big reader.
I love it. Those are great recommendations. Switching from analog to digital, what is your favorite gadget that you couldn't live without?
I think everything's getting eaten by the iPhone.
I usually say when I ask this question, other than your iPhone, because it's true, we can't. But other than iPhone, I'm thinking more like
I like
any gadget around the house, or
I want to like the Remarkable, which is like an e-ink tablet for taking notes and writing. I got one a while ago. Like, I like the idea of it. I hardly ever use it, to be honest.
My wife has one, and it's the same thing. I don't know why, but
it's really hard to create a new. It's really hard for new hardware entrants, and so hopefully that changes. But my Apple Watch is probably number 2. And my laptop is probably also number 1. I'm stuck in the Apple ecosystem, and I grew up running mixed distros and stuff, but like now, the Apple ecosystem, I'm in it.
So. An iPhone is a podcast studio now, so it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Travel destinations, any favorites you've been to?
Yeah, I've been all across the world. I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time in China before COVID, when Americans could still go to China. So it's really cool to see that part of the world and the differences.
What's it like? Because, the TikTok feed is full right now of a lot of carefully placed videos about the advancement of China And I'm curious how much of it is real and how much of it isn't, if I'm frank.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot has changed since I was there, 6 years ago at this point. But very technologically forward in a lot of ways. Obviously, there's a lot of, I think, things that we should take as warnings around, techno authoritarianism, possibly. But I think fundamentally China is a great place, and highly recommend checking it out. Just see the differences between the East and the West. I also really enjoyed going to South America. I visited Colombia, visiting Argentina later this year.
Have you been to Peru?
I haven't been to Peru, but I'd love to check out
Peru
Peru.
is so good. Machu
Yeah.
Picchu is life-changing. You got to go.
Yeah.
I went last year we actually brought our 11-month-old at the time. So don't be shy. You can bring the little one.
Yeah, I'd love to go and see some of the Incan and Mayan stuff. So it's more.
A cool story about Machu Picchu is that when you take the tour there, they'll tell you that when the conquistadors arrived in Peru, they basically sacked the entire country as they were wont to do, but they never sacked Machu Picchu. And there's only one reason they know that, because the written record isn't great, and that's because Machu Picchu, when it was discovered, still had all the gold in its vaults. So that's how they knew that the conquistadors never made it as far as Machu Picchu, because when they found gold, they never left it. So
That's interesting.
Inspirational figures. Who's someone that you really think of as an inspirational figure, either personally or?
Steve Jobs is a big one for me. Elon Musk is a big one for me. I'd say the late Pope, also a big one for me.
R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. Yeah, I just got the news this morning. It's too bad. But yeah, I mean, I like to look at people who have extraordinary capabilities, and often, to be extraordinary, like the determinism, the will, and the grit are kind of three characteristics that are foundational. They're required. They're conditional for success, and so. I like to look at people that have big impacts in the world, both on the technology side, but also on the human side. So,
yeah, I love listening to the stories of specifically really successful entrepreneurs, because it's such a crazy path to take in your life, and the people that do it big, like they really took some big bets, and it's just cool to hear the stories.
Yeah, exactly, and it's all about risk. I think you've that right, Tony. And so risk is the key. Risk and uncertainty, are really difficult to lean into as humans.
Yeah,
but they're prerequisites for massive success a lot of times.
For sure.
Understanding how these entrepreneurs hedge their risk and make big bets, I think is really interesting.
Productivity hacks. Any special things that you do to get more done?
Use leverage agents wherever you can.
Use AgentKit.
Use AgentKit. Use language models, and they get you usually 80% of where you need to go.
But what about more specifically than that? Like for the average person that's listening, like should they just start using ChatGPT? Is there a specific stack that you think that most people could benefit from?
Yeah, if you're not using ChatGPT, highly recommend getting with the program. Really though, Grok 3 is great. Anthropic, Claude is also great, and kind of the leaderboards in terms of where these models excel is kind of changing constantly, and so we're seeing a lot of battle taking place between the major model creators, and you even see open source models like Llama and the launch of Llama 3.
Venice as well. Shout out Venice on base. They're doing a great job building
Venice
open.
In the open world.
I do use ChatGPT a lot, but I've been using Venice more whenever I think of it to go there, and it's come a long way too.
Yeah, I mean, privacy is key, and privacy is a foundational value for the crypto world, obviously through encryption. And so, this is what interested me in distributed physical infrastructure, and it's just as important for models. And there's a great saying "not your keys, not your coin." And then Ahmad Mustak from Stability has the saying "not your models, not your brain." And so, if you don't if you start to really use language models and exocortex to do reasoning for you, and you don't understand how that model works, you don't have root access to it, it's not your brain anymore.
Have you seen the new Black Mirror season?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Well, I won't spoil it, but episode 1 is exactly what you're talking about. So
Cool. Maybe I'll have to watch it. Yeah, I've been more focused on techno optimist views of the future. I feel like the techno pessimistic views are a little bit tired now.
people say that, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know. Black Mirror is interesting. So, sometimes it can be hit or miss, but I don't know if they're necessarily always as pessimistic as people say. Like
Yeah,
sometimes they're more satire. I think like in
that's
this particular one, it's sort of a satire actually of like subscription culture more than anything.
that's interesting. Yeah, I need to check it out. I mean, I've seen every other season of Black Mirror, and I'm a big fan. It's kind of like our modern day Twilight Zone in a lot of ways. So
Yeah,
it's good.
agreed. All right, alternate career path. Last question. If you weren't doing what you're doing, what do you think you would be doing?
That's a great question. I can't imagine myself not working in technology and taking the risk to drive technology forward.
Yeah.
If I wasn't working technology, I'd probably be working on the other end on the venture side. So if I wasn't able to take the risk myself, I'd be hoping to back entrepreneurs and individuals that could take the risk. And so I'd probably say venture would be my other path. But I'd much rather.
Are you saying those who can't do right checks? Is that what you're trying to say?
And I'm not saying that, but I think it's much more fun to be on the actual execution side than taking the bets. Obviously, that's a critical part of this what's happening here too.
Awesome.
So I'd say that, yeah.
Amazing. Well, to put a pin on the end here, anyone who's watching this who might be interested in finding out more about how they can sort of leverage what you guys are building with AgentKit, where would you send them?
Yeah, check out our documentation. If you just Google Coinbase Developer Platform, that'll route you right to our portal and to our docs. We have templates, so that all you need to do is add an API key from Coinbase Developer Kit, click Run inside of Replit. It configures all the package management, the entire environment for you, and then you can get a working agent running in like 30 seconds. And so, again, like the best way to learn is to do. So try one of our templates out in our documentation for the Coinbase Developer Platform, for AgentKit, and let us know if you have feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
What about people who maybe aren't devs, but they're thinking of dabbling and they want to see if they can do it, if they can sort of vibe code as has been the popular thing? Yeah, what would you say to them?
I was going to say we're all devs now, so it's no excuse to not be. Just because you're not a developer doesn't mean you can't write code anymore. And so, obviously developers are better positioned to leverage language models because the more specific you can be around your goals and your architecture for your software and like the functional hierarchy dependencies, probably the better results you'll get. But I think anyone can write code now, so you should try it. You should still create a Coinbase API key for our developer platform, try writing code, and try to build something cool. You might surprise yourself. So
amazing. Well, I appreciate your time, Kevin. It's been a great chat. I feel like we could chat for a few hours, but I'll let you get back to your busy day. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and it was really great to chat with you.
Great. Thank you, Tody. It's been an awesome interview, and it's been great meeting you. And I'm really excited to introduce your community to the Coinbase developer platform. If anyone wants to reach me, they can follow me on Twitter. It's at KLEFFEW94. I'm also on Farcaster. I'm on Zora. I'm on LinkedIn. So reach out and would love to connect with you.
Amazing. Are you going to any events or anything this year? I wonder if I'll get a chance to meet you in person. I'm going to be at FarCon, but I don't know if you'll be there.
I won't be at FarCon. I'm actually at the LangChain developer conference called Interrupt in San Francisco. I'll mainly be around San Francisco this year, but I think I'm planning on going to Buenos Aires for DevConnect in November. So
that would be cool. We'll see if the family situation allows, but that would be pretty cool. I've always wanted to go to Argentina. So
yeah, same here.
Awesome. Well, either way, we'll see you on chain.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Cheers. Bye.